I never thought the day would come when Jake, my best friend since third grade, would flat out refuse to help me with a group project. I mean, this was the guy I trusted with everything, from awful haircut decisions to last-minute cramming for tests. But there we were, sitting across from each other in the library, and when I asked him to lend a hand on our science project, he just shook his head and said, "Not this time." It hit me harder than I expected because, honestly, this wasn't just any project. It was the math modeling contest our whole school was buzzing about. For years, Jake and I had teamed up for everything. We were like some unstoppable duo, the kind everyone thought would just cruise through high school together without drama. So why was he shutting me out now? Worse, why did it feel like he was actually competing against me? Look, I get it. It sounds ridiculous at first. Math modeling? Competitive? Like, who would think that something as nerdy as that could tear you apart? But for us, it wasn't about the math. It was about pride, about who deserved to shine first. You wouldn't believe how small this competition started. One week, we're cracking jokes over pizza about the best strategy to solve a problem, and the next, Jake's railing on me for not pulling my weight, even though all I'd done was suggest a slightly different approach. He was the king of teamwork, but suddenly the idea of working with me made him scowl like I'd just asked him to juggle flaming chainsaws. The moment it all crystallized was this exact scene, sitting there in the school library with the dull hum of fluorescent lights and halfway done study guides scattered around us. I asked him for help on the data visualization part because, honestly, I'm better with the creative stuff than the raw number crunching. He looked at me like I'd asked him to sacrifice a kidney. "I'm handling that myself," he said quietly but firmly enough that there was zero room for argument. And when I pressed on, trying to remind him how this was supposed to be a team effort, his patience wore thinner than the pages of our notebook. He didn't yell, didn't storm out, he just walked away. And I sat there dumbfounded, wondering how the guy who once had my back so completely ended up being the biggest obstacle I faced. That's the thing, when did Jake stop being my friend and start becoming this rival I barely recognized? I kept turning that over in my head. The brutal quiet between us after that moment seemed louder than any argument. You know, it's weird how one so small event, one refusal, can turn something familiar into a total mystery. So yeah, Jake and I ended up battling it out over what should have been just a silly school contest. And it ended up changing way more than just who got the award. But how did we get there? What even triggered this shift? And was there any way back once the competition turned us against each other? That's the story I need to tell. It all started with Jake walking away from me in the library that day, and trust me, it's a ride you don't want to miss. Jake, Mia, and I had always been this tight-knit trio that everyone at school knew about. We practically had our own little ecosystem, Jake with his sarcastic grin and uncanny ability to solve any problem, Mia with her infectious laugh and the diplomatic skill to keep Jake and me from spiraling into our usual petty squabbles, and me, well, often playing the middleman, trying to keep the peace while secretly loving the chaos. Back in 9th grade, the three of us were inseparable. We'd tackle group projects like a well-oiled machine, crushing quizzes and pushing each other to do better without ever turning into rivals or competitors. It felt like we were this unstoppable force. Even the teachers joked they wished all their students were as solid as us. Jake was that guy everyone looked up to, sharp, confident, effortlessly cool without trying too hard. Mia was the heart that kept us grounded, always reminding us not to take ourselves too seriously, while I guess I was the glue, the one who'd listen when things got tense or when someone needed a bit of encouragement. Oh, so when Mr. Friends Thompson announced the upcoming math modeling contest, the buzz around school got intense. It was supposed to be this big deal, an opportunity to showcase not just math skills but creativity, teamwork, and problem-solving under pressure. I remember us sitting in the cafeteria, the table littered with half-eaten sandwiches and our endless jokes, when Jake mentioned he wanted to give it a shot. "Let's crush this thing," he said, flashing that cocky grin of his. Mia and I were on board immediately. Of course, it was about winning, but it was also about doing it together, like everything else we tackled. But then, as the contest got closer, things started to rearrange themselves in ways none of us expected. Suddenly, Jake got this intense focus when it came to the contest, an intensity that I hadn't really seen before. He began spending extra hours in the library, staying later than usual, and when I'd suggest working together, he shrugged it off with vague promises. Mia tried to keep us all on the same page, nudging Jake to loop me in and reminding me not to take it personally. And that's where the tension began to sneak in, almost unnoticed at first. What had been effortless teamwork suddenly felt like walking on a tightrope. Jake's jokes turned a little sharper, his usual easy smirk sometimes edged into something colder when our study sessions overlapped. Mia caught both of us exchanging glances with a flicker of something like rivalry, and you could tell she was worried without saying so. From my side, I kept wondering why this contest meant so much more than any test or project before. It was just another school event, wasn't it? But as I saw Jake hunker down and cut back on the easy camaraderie, I realized this competition wasn't just about math or trophies, it was personal. For Jake, it felt like this was his chance to step up, to be the one everyone noticed first. Maybe even the one who outpaced what everyone thought he could do. And maybe for me, well, it was starting to feel like a test of whether I could keep up or would just be left behind. Mia, ever the peacemaker, tried to pull us back. Not just with words, but by inviting us to hang out outside of school hours, reminding us we were more than any contest. But sometimes, when you're caught up in the heat of things, those reminders get lost under all the frustration and quiet competitiveness. And then, of course, the contest itself had logistics that made things tricky. Mr. Thompson, maybe unknowingly, added fuel to the fire by encouraging us to form our own teams. He said something like, "This is your moment to shine individually or in groups, but only as one unit, not a trio." Suddenly, the tight bond Jake, Mia, and I had was split into impossible choices. Jake decided he wanted to form his own team, leaving Mia and me scrambling to figure out what our moves would be. And Mia, being the diplomatic soul she is, ended up caught in the middle, trying to support both of us without seeming like she was choosing sides. It felt like everything was shifting. Our once effortless harmony now had these strange undercurrents, unspoken tensions, awkward silences, and that growing sense that the contest wasn't just a contest anymore. It was a battleground for who would define this chapter in our lives. And honestly, I couldn't quite put my finger on why it mattered so much. Was it pride? The fear of being left behind? Or just teenage stubbornness wrapped in a math competition? Probably all of those. But what I did know was that the trio we were known as, the trio everyone counted on as this unbeatable team, was slowly unraveling. And as Jake started to pull away and Mia tried to hold the pieces together, I was left wondering how far this competition was going to push us and whether our friendship could survive if it really became about who came out on top. It wasn't like the cracks showed up overnight. It was more like you start noticing these tiny little things, Jake rolling his eyes when I tried to explain my ideas during study sessions, or that indirect sarcasm about how I supposedly didn't get the challenge. At first I brushed it off thinking, yeah, he's just stressed, or maybe he's just super competitive. But those little moments stacked up like pebbles slowly building a wall between us. One afternoon, we were at the library again, working on our respective parts, but the air was thick with that awkward silence that doesn't really make any noise but just screams tension. Jake was scribbling furiously in his notebook, occasionally glancing over with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. I tried to bring up an idea about data modeling, something I thought could add some flair to the project, but he just cut me off. "That's not going to help. Stick to what you're good at," he said, and the casual dismissal stung worse than if he'd shouted it across the room. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, like I'd become the weak link overnight. What really got under my skin was how our mutual friend Mia started looking like she was trying to mediate a delicate peace treaty rather than just hanging out like she usually did. She'd nudge Jake during breaks, trying to pull him away for a chat, then turn to me and say, "Don't take it to heart, maybe he's just overwhelmed." But honestly, that didn't feel like enough. It was like we were all speaking different languages and none of us had the dictionary. Then came the moment I didn't see coming. Jake started showing up to study sessions with his new team, separate from Mia and me. I remember the first time I noticed it, he was across the cafeteria leaning over a table with new people laughing and joking, completely different from the trio that had been our everything. That evening, Mia confessed she felt stuck between us. "It's like you two aren't even friends anymore," she said quietly when we met up to talk. "And it's killing me." She was right. There was this invisible line, a silent boundary that suddenly defined all our interactions. And then, the unexpected betrayal hit, a text from Jake that wasn't meant for me but somehow found its way there. It was blunt and cold, talking about how he wished I would just quit trying to cling to a contest that was way over my head. Seeing those words felt like a punch to the gut. I confronted him about it, hoping maybe there'd be some kind of apology or explanation, but he barely looked up. "I'm tired of carrying us both," he said, eyes tired, voice flat. That moment shattered whatever illusion I'd been holding on to about our friendship surviving this competition unscathed. I tried, really tried, to bridge the gap. I reached out, invited him to catch up, reminded him of all the ridiculous things we'd done together, like that one time we disastrously tried to build a makeshift raft in the creek, ending up soaked and laughing until our sides hurt. But every attempt seemed to backfire. The more I pushed for connection, the more Jake pulled away, convinced that the only way forward was to outdo me, to prove something to everyone but mostly to himself. Mia was stuck in the middle, the unwilling diplomat juggling peace talks that were never easy. Sometimes I caught her staring at Jake and me from across the room, eyes full of unspoken worry. And that's where the real mess started, the tangled web of emotions, lost trust, and growing bitterness that turned what should have been a fun competition into a battlefield none of us wanted. It was clear this contest was no longer just about math or winning. It had become about pride, loyalty, and the fragile line between friendship and rivalry. And as Jake and I drifted further apart with Mia caught trying to keep us both afloat, I realized that whatever happened next would change us forever. The contest day arrived with a kind of electric tension that seemed to hum through the hallways of our school. The auditorium was buzzing with kids nervously reviewing equations or frantically tapping on laptops. I found my seat. The weight of everything that had happened, Jake's cold words, the silent breaks, Mia's quiet worry settling like a stone in my stomach. When the results were announced, Jake's name took the spotlight first. His team had snagged first place, the judges praising their flawless logic and innovative approach. There was applause, sure, but beneath it, that lump in my throat grew heavier. For a moment I considered walking away, shrugging it off like it didn't matter, but Mia's steady presence beside me reminded me otherwise. Then my turn came. Our team, Mia and I, had taken third place. Not bad by any stretch. We'd pulled it together despite everything. But it wasn't the award that shook me. It was what I saw in Jake's eyes during the handshake. A mix of triumph, yes, but also something tired and maybe, just maybe, a hint of regret. The victory didn't bring the satisfaction you'd expect. Instead, it laid bare the cost of what we'd lost. After the ceremony, Mia pulled both of us aside. "It's not just a contest," she said softly. "It's about you guys, what you've always been to each other." And in that quiet corner, something shifted. Jake glanced at me, then looked away, swallowing whatever he meant to say. I realized that this contest had peeled back more than just our math skills. It exposed vulnerabilities we'd both been hiding. We didn't instantly ride off into the sunset laughing like nothing happened. No, the rivalry had changed the fabric of our friendship. But it also opened up a door, one that finally led to honest conversations. Jake admitted, not without some hesitation, that the competition became more about proving something to himself than beating me. I guess I was scared. That if I didn't win, I'd be just the guy who rides your coattails, he said, voice rough with something like apology. I confessed how all those rejections and snide remarks cut deeper than I wanted to admit, how I'd felt left out of the one thing we were supposed to do together. Mia nodded, smiling in that knowing way she always did, like she'd been carrying the weight of both our emotions the whole time. We didn't magically erase the past few months, but we started to rebuild piece by piece. Jake and I agreed on one thing. Next time, it wouldn't be about outdoing one another. It would be about making space for both of us to shine. And maybe, just maybe, keeping Mia out of the diplomatic trenches. Reflecting on it now, I see that weird, messy mix of pride, hurt, and growth as something almost necessary. Sometimes the people we're closest to can rub us the wrong way in ways no one else can. But those challenges also show us what really matters. So here's the thing. If you've ever found yourself tangled up in a friendship turned rivalry, don't be too quick to write it off. Those battles, they can sting, yeah, but they can also teach us who we truly are beneath the surface. Jake and I, we're still figuring it out. But the contest? It wasn't just about math. It was about learning to hold space for each other, even when the scoreboard tries to tell a different story.